monk's bare foot lands silently on wet stone, and for a moment, the only sound in Luang Prabang is rice grains dropping into a bronze bowl. It is not yet 6 in the morning. Mist still sits low over the Mekong, and already, before the sun has cleared the ridgeline, an entire town is kneeling in the street. This is Laos, a landlocked country of roughly 7.97 million people wedged between Thailand, Vietnam, China, Myanmar, and Cambodia, spread across 236,800 square kilometers of mountain, forest, and river valley. It is one of the last places in mainland Southeast Asia where modern life has arrived quietly, almost reluctantly, without displacing what came before it. Bangkok roars. Hanoi hums with motorbikes stacked 10 deep at every light. Laos, by contrast, moves at the pace of the Mekong itself, steady, unhurried, occasionally swollen with sudden force, but never in a rush to prove anything to anyone. This is the story of a country that industrialized its rivers before it industrialized its habits, where a new railway can cut a 2-day journey down to 3 hours, and yet the same elderly woman still wakes before dawn to cook sticky rice over charcoal, because some rhythms are older than any train. The Lao Day begins in near darkness. In villages along Route 13 and in the old quarters of Luang Prabang, women rise before their children to steam khao niao, the glutinous sticky rice that anchors nearly every meal, packing it into small woven baskets called tip khao that will travel to the fields, the market stall, or the school bag. This is the moment of Takbat, the alms-giving procession, when saffron-robed monks walk in silent lines through the streets and residents kneel with their rice baskets to offer a handful to each passing bowl. It is not performed for visitors, though visitors often watch. It is a daily transaction of merit-making, a belief that generosity given without expectation of return accumulates something called baun, merit, that shapes one's fortune in this life and beyond. By 7, the morning markets, or talat sao, are already loud with commerce. Baskets of dried fish, bundles of lemongrass, trays of the pungent fermented fish paste paddock that seasons half the country's cooking. Neighbors greet each other not with rushed nods, but with the traditional nop, palms pressed together at chest height, a small bow that calibrates itself to age and status without a word needing to be spoken. Villages here are less collections of individuals than extended webs of obligation. A ban or village functions almost like an extended household, where a wedding, a funeral, or a house building is understood as everyone's responsibility, not just the family's. The pace of the morning is deliberate because the Lao concept of time itself resists urgency. There is a common phrase, bor pen nyang, meaning it's nothing, or no worries, deployed constantly to diffuse stress, smooth over delay, and remind everyone that very little is worth the anxiety of rushing. That unhurried temperament is inseparable from what Lao people hold most dear, which is a form of Theravada Buddhism fused so completely with older animist beliefs that the two are rarely spoken of separately. Nearly 2/3 of the population identifies as Buddhist, but almost everyone, regardless of formal religion, honors the Phi, spirits believed to inhabit trees, rivers, rice fields, and the human body itself, which is why small spirit houses stand outside homes and why a batsi ceremony, involving cotton strings tied around the wrist to bind one's 32 guardian spirits in place, marks nearly every major life event, from a birth to a departure to a recovery from illness. Laos is also home to more than 40 recognized ethnic groups, broadly clustered into the lowland Lao Lum along the Mekong Plains, the mid-altitude Lao Theong in the hills, and the highland Lao Sung, which includes Hmong and Yao, communities in the mountains near Sheng Koang and Luang Namtha. Each group carries its own language, textile patterns, and spiritual practice. Hmong New Year celebrations feature elaborate embroidered clothing and a courtship game called Paov Pob, where unmarried young men and women toss a cloth ball back and forth in rows. And yet, all are drawn together each April for Bun Pi Mai, the Lao New Year, when entire towns dissolve into days of good-natured water throwing meant to wash away the misfortune of the old year. In November, Vientiane hosts Bao That Luang, a week-long festival centered on the gold-spired stupa that serves as the country's most sacred monument, drawing monks and pilgrims from every province for candlelit processions. And each May, villages along the Mekong stage Bun Bang Phai, the rocket festival, launching homemade bamboo rockets into the sky in a raucous communal appeal to the rain gods before the rice planting season begins. The whole event equal parts prayer, engineering contest, and neighborhood party, with families competing good-naturedly over whose rocket climbs highest. What unifies these different peoples, despite the mountains and rivers that have historically kept them apart, is a shared relationship to the land itself and a national identity forged partly in resistance, first to French colonization, then to the upheavals of the 20th century, and partly in a quieter, ongoing negotiation with a landscape that has never made anything easy. That negotiation extends directly into how people earn a living, and to understand it fully, one has to look past the temples and toward the rivers and mountains that quietly power the country's economy. Laos remains one of the poorer nations in Southeast Asia, with a nominal GDP per capita of roughly $2,400, though when adjusted for purchasing power, that figure rises closer to $9,800, reflecting how far money stretches locally. Agriculture still employs the largest share of the workforce, particularly wet rice cultivation across the Mekong floodplain and the Bolivian Plateau's celebrated coffee and cardamom farms. But it is hydropower that has transformed the national economy most dramatically. With more than 80 dams built or under construction on the Mekong and its tributaries, Laos exports the majority of that electricity to Thailand and Vietnam, earning itself the nickname the Battery of Southeast Asia, even as the practice draws sustained criticism from environmental groups downstream. Mining, particularly copper and gold extraction around Sepon in Savannakhet province, and a growing garment manufacturing sector around Vientiane Round, out an economy still finding its footing. Youth unemployment at just over 2% is low by global standards, though the figure masks widespread underemployment and the reality that many young Lao work informally, in family fields or small roadside businesses rather than salaried jobs. Work culture here resists the framing of ambition common elsewhere. A shopkeeper closing early to attend a neighbor's Basi ceremony is not seen as unprofessional, but is observing a correct order of priorities. Employer-employee relationships in the small businesses that dominate Lao commercial life, noodle stalls, motorbike repair shops, family-run guest houses, tend to blur into something closer to extended kinship, with apprenticeship passed down informally rather than through certification. That same intimacy defines the way Lao families gather at the table, and to understand this culture fully, one must first sit down to eat with it. Sticky rice, eaten by hand and used almost like a utensil, is not simply a staple but a marker of Lao identity, distinct from the jasmine rice favored across the border in Thailand. Alongside it comes lap, a minced meat salad, chicken, fish, duck, or buffalo, dressed with lime, fish sauce, mint, and toasted rice powder, considered essential to any celebration and often prepared raw as layap dip for special occasions. Tam mak hung, a green papaya salad pounded in a clay mortar with chilies, garlic, and paddock, delivers a sharp, funky heat that visitors either crave immediately or grow into slowly. Or lamb, a thick stew from Luang Prabang built around bitter eggplant, dill, and often a distinctive spicy wood called mai sakan, tastes of nowhere else on earth. Sayua, a lemongrass and galangal pork sausage grilled over charcoal until the fat crackles, perfumes entire street corners in the evening. Meals are eaten seated on a low-woven mat called a satanome, food placed in shared dishes at the center, sticky rice baskets within reach of every hand, and the ritual of eating together, rarely alone, rarely rushed, reinforces the same communal bonds visible in the morning almsgiving. Geography shapes the plate directly. The Mekong and its tributaries supply freshwater fish and the fermented pastes that season nearly everything. The humid lowland climate grows the rice that underwrites every meal, and the cooler highlands around the Balavan Plateau produce coffee, cardamom, and the herbs that give northern Lao cooking its distinct bitterness compared to the sweeter, coconut-heavy dishes of the south. To taste this landscape fully is also to walk through it, and the terrain that grows Laos's food is the same terrain that has shaped its people for centuries. The Annamite Range forms a rugged spine along the eastern border with Vietnam, its limestone karsts and dense forest sheltering some of the region's rarest wildlife, including the elusive saola, discovered only in 1992. In the north, the Nam Ha National Protected Area spans more than 2,200 square kilometers of primary forest, threaded with trekking routes that pass through Kamu and Aka villages, largely unchanged by outside contact. The Mekong River itself runs for roughly 1,865 kilometers through Lao territory before continuing on to Cambodia and Vietnam, its banks lined with fishing villages that still use bamboo traps their grandparents would recognize. In Zhenkuang province, the Plain of Jars scatters thousands of massive stone vessels, some more than 2,000 years old, their purpose still debated by archaeologists, across a highland plateau pocked with unexploded ordnance left from a war most visitors have forgotten. Near Luang Prabang, the turquoise cascades of Kwangsi Falls, tumbling down a series of limestone tiers into pools tinted an almost unnatural blue-green by dissolved calcium carbonate, draw both tourists and local families on weekend outings, swimming in the shallows while children leap from rope swings tied to overhanging branches. Seasons dictate the rhythm of rural life directly. The monsoon, arriving between May and October, floods the rice paddies and swells the Mekong into a churning brown torrent, while the dry season that follows, cool and clear from November through February, is when villages harvest, celebrate, and travel. Locals speak of Pai Thiao, simply going out to wander, a favorite pastime that might mean a motorbike ride to a waterfall or an afternoon fishing with a hand net, no destination required, only movement for its own sake. Movement itself has changed faster in Laos over the past 5 years than in the previous 50, and nowhere is that shift more visible than on the Laos-China Railway, a 422-kilometer high-speed line completed in 2021 that connects the northern border town of Botan to the capital, Vientiane, cutting a journey that once took 2 grinding days by road down to under 3 hours. For a country with no coastline and, until recently, barely any rail infrastructure at all, the railway represents an engineering leap few outsiders anticipated, threading more than 70 tunnels through some of the most difficult limestone terrain in the region and crossing over 100 bridges along the way. Villages that once measured their distance from the capital in days now measure it in a single unhurried afternoon, and small towns like Vang Vieng and Luang Prabang have found themselves reshaped almost overnight by the flow of domestic travelers the line makes possible. Yet daily transport for most Lao remains defiantly analog. Motorbikes weave through Vientiane's low-rise streets past food carts and monasteries. Song Tiu, shared pickup trucks fitted with 2 facing benches, serve as informal buses between provinces, and in smaller towns, walking or cycling remains simply the most sensible option since fuel is expensive relative to local wages, and distances are often short enough to cover on foot. Vientiane itself, the world's only capital city that still feels more like an overgrown riverside town than a metropolis, offers a texture unlike its neighbors. French colonial shophouses lean beside gilded temple roofs, tuk-tuks idle in the shade rather than jostling for position, and the loudest sound most evenings is the chatter from a riverside noodle stall rather than traffic. Smartphones have arrived everywhere, and social media use among younger Lao has grown quickly, powering everything from small home-based businesses selling hand-woven textiles online to informal ride arrangements coordinated over messaging apps. But 4G coverage still thins out fast beyond the provincial capitals, meaning modernity here often exists in patches rather than as an even blanket over the whole country. Those patches of connectivity matter most to the young, who are growing up straddling 2 very different Laos. The National University of Laos in Vientiane and Souphanouvong University in Luang Prabang anchor a higher education system still expanding, alongside a growing number of vocational and technical institutes aimed at feeding the hydropower, hospitality, and manufacturing sectors. Youth unemployment sits at a strikingly low 2.4%, but that number reflects necessity as much as opportunity. Most young Lao who cannot find formal work simply return to family farms or informal trades rather than remain jobless. Many feel the pull of two competing worlds, the traditional expectation to remain close to family and village, tending rice fields their parents tended, against the increasingly visible pull of Bangkok, Seoul, or Australia, where wages run many times higher and where hundreds of thousands of Lao migrant workers have already gone. Young people who stay often build identity through a blend of old and new, attending Bun Pai Mai water festivals in the afternoon and streaming Thai pop music that evening, weaving traditional textile patterns into modern fashion lines sold through small Vientiane boutiques and Instagram accounts. Whether they stay or go typically comes down to one honest calculation. The wages available at home rarely match the cost of the ambitions many now carry, planted there by phones that show them the wider world in vivid detail. As the light thins toward evening, though, that wider world recedes, and something older reasserts itself. Cooking fires flicker to life along riverside villages, the smell of grilled saiua drifting into lanes where children play barefoot until the very last light disappears. In Luang Prabang, the night market unfurls its canopy of hand-woven textiles and silver jewelry beneath the glow of temple spires, vendors calling out gently rather than aggressively, more conversation than commerce. Along the Mekong, families gather on wooden platforms to watch the sun drop behind the hills of Thailand on the opposite bank, beer Lao passed hand to hand, the murmur of conversation rarely rising above the sound of the current. In the villages, without much artificial light to compete, the sky asserts itself fully, and evenings often end early, families retreating indoors by 9, the whole town falling into a hush broken only by insects, and occasionally distant chanting from a monastery. What defines this hour more than any other is a kind of collective exhale, the sense of a place that has decided, quietly and repeatedly, not to chase the same relentless pace as its neighbors, choosing instead a rhythm dictated by rice, river, and ritual. None of this comes without real cost. Laos remains one of the poorest countries in the region, and roughly 18% of its population still lives below the national poverty line, concentrated heavily in remote mountain provinces where roads wash out every rainy season and healthcare access can mean a half-day journey by motorbike to the nearest district clinic. Government debt sits at a heavy 75% of GDP, and inflation has run in the high single digits in recent years, squeezing household budgets in ways that show up quietly in a smaller basket of vegetables at the market or a delayed motorbike repair rather than in any visible crisis. Unexploded ordnance from the Vietnam War era still contaminates significant portions of the countryside, particularly in Giang Kuang, a lingering hazard that continues to injure farmers and children decades after the bombing stopped, and that shapes which fields a family will and will not plant. Hydropower development, while economically vital, has displaced villages and altered fish migration patterns that downstream communities have depended on for generations, a tension between national revenue and local livelihood that has no easy resolution. And yet, people stay. And more than that, people who leave often find themselves pulled back. What holds them is difficult to reduce to a single word, but it resembles something like proportion, a life measured not by acquisition, but by obligation fulfilled, meals shared, spirits honored, mornings that begin the same way they have for centuries. It is a harder life materially than many alternatives, but a fuller one relationally, and for many Lao, that trade continues to make sense. The mist that rose over the Mekong at dawn has long since burned away by the time night falls again, but the same rhythm that carried the monks through the street that morning carries the country through everything else, patient, cyclical, unbothered by the acceleration happening just beyond its borders. Laos has not resisted the modern world so much as absorbed it selectively, taking the railway but keeping the rice basket, taking the smartphone but keeping the bassy string tied gently around the wrist. It remains, in its own unhurried way, one of the last places in Asia where an entire day can still be measured by the sound of rice falling into a bowl rather than the ping of a notification. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson this small, landlocked country keeps offering the rest of the world, that a life does not need to move quickly to move meaningfully. If you found something in this story that stayed with you, that's really the whole point of this channel, going beyond the postcard version of a place to understand how people actually live inside it, day to day, meal to meal, season to season. If you enjoyed spending this time in Laos, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss where we go next, because there's a lot more of the world left to sit with slowly. And if something in this story reminded you of a place you've lived or raised a question you're still turning over, drop it in the comments below. Those conversations are honestly one of the best parts of making these. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.